Hey everybody, thanks for joining for another Unity tutorial. In this video, I already mentioned in the last video how in this video I'm gonna basically be just messing with the editor, creating some buttons to where it makes it easier to generate terrain, and I don't have to click play to generate terrain each time. So it just makes it a lot easier to work with some of the variable and modifying them, trial and error type things. And yeah, in the last video, and the video before that, I just worked on creating this cool terrain system. So yeah, in this video I'm going to basically be just messing with the editor. So to do that, I'm going to go into this script and in the terrain generator, and just to make it simpler for now, or well, just to help me out for later, I'm going to create when I generate the terrain, I'm going to have to call this a couple times, so it would be simpler if I could just create a public void called generate terrain, where I then generate this map. So instead of having to generate this map, calling this entire method, I can just call this method right here with no parameters, and it will just instantly generate it. So I'm then going to just generate terrain on startup. So basically it does the exact same thing, I just stored it in a method. So next, what I'm going to do is I already created an editor folder, but yeah, all you would have to do is just go to here, create folder, and then just call it editor. Editor folder just makes it to where it doesn't get transferred when you build the game, because this is just useful for you when you're creating the game. It doesn't need to be transferred. And now I'm then going to want to create a C# script, and then call this terrain generator editor. And then in this script, I'm going to want to make it to where it doesn't derive from auto behavior. I want it to derive from editor, but to be able to access that word, I need to then be using the Unity editor. And then at the very top here, I want to then add a attribute, being a custom editor, type of the terrain generator. So I basically tell it what I want it to be able to edit. And in this case, I want it to be the terrain generator script. I then want to move the start and update method, and I want to then be able to then access my terrain generator script, so I need to make a reference to it. So I need to create a terrain generator. I'm just going to call it terrain generator. And then I then want to, in void on enable, I want to set the terrain generator equal to target, which is basically just your script. But the issue is that target is an object, so I need to then cast it. And there's a couple different ways to do it. You can either cast it by putting two parentheses in front of it, or an open and close parentheses, and then doing terrain generator, and that would then work. But this has to actually be the class. That would work. Or another way to do it is using after target the keyword as, and then doing the terrain generator. This is just the way I'm going to do it, just because I already wrote it out this way, but you can do it whichever way, and it works fine each way. So what I then want to do is create a public override void called onInspectorGUI, and then it'll create a base.onInspectorGUI, which is basically where all your parameters already is on your script. So if you put it above, it'll put it above everything on your script in the inspector, and if you put it below, it'll put it below everything. And how it would then add elements is it basically adds them vertically. So if you want to add elements horizontally, you have to add a special horizontal field to it. And that's what I want to do for the first two buttons, because I want the generate and delete buttons to be side by side, and then the regenerate to be below that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a editor GUI layout dot begin horizontal, and then I then want to do a editor GUI layout dot end horizontal. And then in between these, I then want to then create my generate and delete buttons. So I want to create an if GUI layout dot button called generate terrain. I then want to then execute this, but then if GUI layout dot button saying delete terrain, I then want to do this. Then what I want to do is after the end horizontal, I then want to then create another if GUI layout dot button. That's going to be called regenerate terrain. I then want to then execute this. So for generate terrain, well, actually, first of all, I'm just going to create my methods in here. So I already have my generate terrain method. I also want a public void for erase terrain data. Then I want to do this, and then I also want to create another public void for regenerate terrain. And basically what I want regenerate terrain to do is basically just erase terrain data and then generate the terrain, because the issue is with the buttons, if you click generate, it would then generate a terrain chunk, but then if you change the settings, then click generate again, it would then overlap the previous terrain chunk and the new terrain chunk, which means what you would have to do is if you have a terrain chunk already there, and then you change the settings, you have to then click the erase terrain chunk, and then generate terrain chunk buttons to then create the new one. But it would be nice if it was just in one button called regenerate that just did that for you. It would be a lot more easier to work with. So what I basically want this to do is just erase terrain data, and then generate the terrain. Now, erase terrain data, I basically want to delete all the elements all the children in this transform, because in the map generator script, we basically parented each block to this object, this terrain generator. So I basically just want to delete all the blocks under this terrain generator. So to do that, I basically want to loop through all the children. So I do for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the transform dot child count, which is the amount of children, I plus plus. I then want to then do destroy, and typically you would do destroy, which would work, but that only works in play mode, and that kind of defeats the purpose. I want to destroy in the edit mode, or in the editor. So I need to do destroy immediate, and this does create a problem, and I don't know why it does it, and I'll show you the problem when it comes up. But basically, I'll show you the fix I ended up figuring out how to. I'll show you the fix that I found out. So what I'm then going to do is I'm then going to then destroy the transform dot get child with an index of I dot game object. Now that erases the terrain data in the editor, I then want to then generate doing the terrain generator dot generate terrain. Delete terrain, I want to do terrain generator dot erase terrain data. And then for the regenerate, I want to do terrain generator dot regenerate terrain. Now I'm then going to go back into Unity and then go to the terrain generator. And as you can see, it then edits it. Every now and then, for whatever reason, it'll then give you an issue, and it'll say at the top like cannot edit multiple objects or whatever. I think that's what it says. And to fix that, all you have to do is copy the component, and then you can then remove the component, and then you can then add it back, and then it'll obviously reset all the values, and that's why you copied it, because now you can then just paste the component values in. So that's just, if it does that, that's a fix for it. Now what I can then do is I can now generate the terrain. As you can see, it then generates the terrain even though I didn't click play. I'm still in the editor. But now what I can then do is I can then delete the terrain. But as you can see, the issue is it only deletes half of them. And if I delete again, it keeps on deleting half of them until they're all gone. So the fix I ended up figuring out is basically I just want to keep on looping through the children and deleting them as long as, so I'm going to do while the transform.child count is greater than 0. So as long as there's still children under this game object, I want to continuously delete them. And that works. And then another thing I'm actually going to do is on startup, in case in the editor, I then generate a terrain. In startup, I don't want it to just generate a terrain, because then again, it can overlap them. So I want to then regenerate, so it then erases them and then generates it. So on startup, I just want to regenerate the terrain. So now, over here, you can see that I can then click generate. It'll generate the terrain. If I click delete, it will then delete the terrain. If I then generate, then change, let's say, the scale down a little bit, and then I click generate, you'll see that it creates a new, the new terrain over the previous terrain. And that's why if this is at 100, and then I click generate, it'll generate that terrain chunk. And then if I then move this down to like 90, and then click regenerate, it deletes it and then generates it. So you don't have to click delete, then generate. You can just click regenerate. So it makes it a little bit nicer and more convenient. So that is all I wanted to basically go over in this video, so you can basically create the terrain chunks in the editor. And yeah, join me for the next video where I'm probably going to be going over colors, so basically how to set the different layers of the terrain to different color values and texture values to make it a little bit more unique. So, see you in the next video.